This video was brought to you by Brilliant. When oil prices crashed after Trump's so-called Liberation Day, most analysts expected OPEC, that is the international cartel of oil-producing states, to either cut oil production or at least slow down their scheduled production hikes. However, that's not what's happened, and OPEC has continued to hike production, pushing oil prices even lower. So in this video, we're going to explain why OPEC apparently want lower prices, how lower prices could be both a symptom and a cause of intra-OPEC tensions, and how this might all end. If you're interested in this video, you're surely interested in the political alliances and groupings which shape our world, like OPEC. So you might also enjoy our poster, Every Alliance Explained. It shows, in slightly confusing detail, all of the world's major alliances, including OPEC, and how different countries link together. Check out the poster by clicking the link in the description. So let's start by explaining what exactly OPEC is. For those of you who don't know, OPEC, or the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, is an international cartel of oil exporting countries that cooperate on oil production to control, or at least influence, the global price of oil. The group was founded in 1960 by the first 5 members: Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela. But it only really became able to control global oil markets in the 1970s, thanks to both a decline in American oil production and a dramatic expansion in OPEC's membership throughout the 1960s, with the cartel accounting for more than half of global oil production in the early 1970s. And this really became apparent in 1973, when most of OPEC, plus Egypt and Syria, declared that they would be cutting oil production and imposing an oil embargo against the US and other Western nations supporting Israel in the Yom Kippur War. In just a couple of weeks, oil prices quadrupled from about $3 per barrel to about $12, triggering inflation and political turmoil across the West. OPEC's power did wane in the 80s and 90s, as a rise in non-OPEC oil production from places like Alaska, the North Sea, and the Gulf of Mexico pushed OPEC's market share down from about half to about a third of total oil production. However, OPEC experienced a second golden era in the 2000s. This is both because of China, which started consuming tons of oil, but also because of Venezuela, which essentially rejoined the cartel when Hugo Chavez took over in 2000. In October 2008, for instance, OPEC announced its biggest ever production cut of 4.2 million barrels per day, pushing oil prices back up from their post-crisis low of $35 a barrel to nearer $70 in 2009. Continued production cuts pushed up prices to $100 a barrel in 2011, where they hovered until late 2014. However, persistently high oil prices encouraged the development of the shale sector in the US, triggering a surge in US production throughout the 2010s. Thanks to shale, in 2018, the US surpassed Saudi Arabia and Russia to become the world's largest oil producer, and in 2020, it became a net oil exporter for the first time since at least 1949. This presented a massive problem for OPEC, which could no longer really control global oil prices or use oil as leverage over the US. As a result, OPEC tried to bankrupt these shale producers by pumping loads of oil to crash the market in 2015. And when this didn't work, in 2016, Saudi Arabia, which as the largest and most profitable oil exporter in the world is basically OPEC's de facto leader, negotiated an output alliance with Russia. Russian oil production had steadily grown since the collapse of the Soviet Union, to the point where Russia was producing basically as much as Saudi Arabia, and the Kremlin was equally anxious about the rise of American shale. This new expanded cartel became known as OPEC+, and also included 10 other formerly non-OPEC members. Now, the Saudis were optimistic that this expanded cartel, which accounted for more than half of global oil production, would give them more control over prices. So in 2022, they announced that they were going to try and get prices up to $100 a barrel. Unfortunately for Saudis though, this didn't really happen, and prices settled at around $80. This is in part due to another rise in non-OPEC production, including from Canada, Brazil, and Guyana. But it was also because the Biden administration started releasing oil from the US Strategic Petroleum Reserve. This caused immense frustration within OPEC, and it soon became clear that some members, most notably Iraq, Kazakhstan, and the UAE, were all pumping more oil than they were supposed to. This forced the Saudis to unilaterally cut production by 2 million barrels a day, below its allotted quota, in an attempt to keep global oil prices high, bringing Saudi output to its lowest level since 2011. Then, after Trump's so-called Liberation Day, prices crashed further to $60 a barrel, as traders anticipated a global recession. Now, you might expect OPEC Plus to cut production at this point, to push those prices back up again. But actually, the opposite happened. The cartel has actually continued with its scheduled production increases, which are expected to add another 2 million barrels a day to the global oil market over the coming months. And this is why oil prices have stayed low, even as Trump has toned down his tariffs. So, what's going on here? Why is OPEC Plus hiking production when prices are already falling? Well, as we see it, there are at least 3 reasons. First, the Saudis have just had enough of voluntarily cutting their own production when other members are cheating the cartel and global prices aren't rising anyway. Secondly, the Saudis want to punish cheaters by pushing prices down and squeezing profit margins. And third, the Saudis and other members of OPEC Plus see this as an opportunity to bankrupt the American shale producers. Now, this didn't work back in 2015, but interest rates are higher today than they were back then, which means that American shale producers won't be able to borrow their way out of trouble like they could in 2015. Nonetheless, this is a risky strategy, and if this price war against American shale producers fails, as it did in 2015, then OPEC Plus could fall apart entirely. If American shale producers can hold out, global supply will stay high, and prices will therefore stay low, especially if Trump does some sort of deal with Iran that basically involves relieving sanctions on Iranian oil exports. And this could all be exacerbated by a tariff-induced global economic slowdown, which would mean weaker oil demand, especially from China, where oil consumption is already plateauing. And once prices fall past a certain point, or if they stay low for too long, OPEC Plus's unity will come under strain. While Saudi Arabia might be able to tolerate a period of lower prices in the name of bankrupting the American shale industry, poorer members, or members in need of oil revenues for war financing, like Russia, just won't, risking a vicious cycle where lower oil prices trigger higher production, putting downwards pressure on prices, etc., etc. These tensions became glaringly apparent during the pandemic, when Russia refused to cut production along with the rest of OPEC+, presumably because it was building up its war chest in preparation for invading Ukraine, sparking a price war between Saudi Arabia and Russia that only ended when Trump stepped in to mediate a truce. These tensions have since been papered over by structurally higher prices and Saudi Arabia's willingness to unilaterally cut production. But if prices fall, the inherent tensions within OPEC+ could well resurface. If you're engaged with complex topics like these, it's probably fair to say that you're at least somewhat interested in improving yourself through interesting, engaging online learning. If so, you'll be interested in this week's sponsor, Brilliant. Brilliant is a learning app designed to help you understand topics from the ground up, on everything from maths to science to AI. Each lesson is filled with hands-on problem solving that lets you actually play with concepts, a method that's proven to be 6 times more effective than just watching lecture videos. To add to this, their app is designed to help you learn wherever you are, with fun, hands-on lessons that you can do whenever you have the time. So instead of mindlessly scrolling on social media, you can get smarter in a few minutes each day. For instance, Brilliant's newly updated science course helps you make sense of our universe at entry level, from the mechanics of simple machines all the way up to black holes. The course helps you better understand the world we live in by explaining the physical principles that drive modern technology, while helping you develop your scientific intuition through visual, interactive problem solving. To try Brilliant for free, visit brilliant.org/TLDR, scan the QR code on screen, or click the link in the description. By doing so, you'll get 20% off an annual premium subscription, and they'll know that you came from us, which really helps us out.